Okay, so principle number one that I'm going to talk about is that Seva is a means to dissolve the ego. Now, the whole of the spiritual path is meant to dissolve the ego. Swamiji, one time, we were sitting at breakfast. This was near Brindaban. It was in Gurgaon, which is close to Delhi. And he was at breakfast, and we were kind of lamenting how long the spiritual path takes, and that we weren't making as fast a progress as we would like to make. And he summed up the whole of the spiritual path between one bite and the next. So visualize Swami sitting at a table, and he had his breakfast there, and we had been whining, and so he...
I correct him there. Maybe you were whining.
Okay. Maybe I was whining. But it was a serious question. And so Swami had a little food on a fork, and he said, the whole of the spiritual path is meant to dissolve the ego. That is done by longer, deeper meditation and seeing God as the doer in everything. And took his bite. That was it. That was the whole lecture, and it was the summation of the spiritual path. So the whole purpose of the spiritual path, as we were saying yesterday, is to dissolve the ego. Now, the ego isn't a thing. It's a state of consciousness and a state of delusive consciousness. It is that period of time in our, one might call it soul's evolution, although the soul doesn't really evolve. Let's say the consciousness of the expression of the soul evolves. But it's that period of time, out of all of infinity, there is a period of time in which the soul takes on bodies, successive bodies, and it falls under the delusion that that body and the personality that it is in is its actual self. And so the ego is the delusion of separation. So it's not a thing. It's not like we have a soul and we have an ego. We have a soul, and that's all we have. We are a soul. And that soul has the delusion of ego for a period of time. So it comes from God. It has this evolutionary lessening and lessening of the grip of that delusion until finally it realizes that it is a delusion. It dissolves that ego or that sense of separation. Then the soul merges back into God. So yesterday we talked about how sadhana helps us do that, the control especially of the life force, and then the release of that life force in the body into the infinite creates the condition necessary for us to go into superconsciousness. And in superconsciousness, in samadhi, we realize that we, the soul, are not the body at all. We're the infinite spirit. But then even those who go into samadhi, there are two states of samadhi. Sabhikalpa samadhi, which is the only way that you can be in that state of consciousness, is to be still with the breath withdrawn from you. And then so that means that basically the breath withdraws. It means the life force in the body, the breath stops, the heart stops, the life force exits. But you're still alive because you aren't the body. But when that life force comes back to the body, then you lose that state of consciousness. You can't maintain it. That's called Sabhikalpa samadhi. There's a higher state, Nirvikalpa samadhi, where the breath comes back and you maintain that state and you can act. But from Sabhikalpa samadhi, you don't act. your energy is withdrawn. We're trying to get there. So our task is to get to that state of consciousness. Now, obviously, in meditation, we're working with the withdrawal of that prana and the offering of it up into the infinite. But once we're out of meditation, still we haven't achieved samadhi, but we're on our way to achieving it. That's our goal. And so the rest of the time, we should be also doing a kind of a sadhana, and that's why Seva is important. Master said that, very strongly said, you will never get there without selfless service, without Seva. Very strongly he said that, and he often talked about how we have to do Seva. We have to do selfless service. Now, selfless service, the purpose of it is to dissolve the ego. Now, we're going to talk more about different aspects of it, but we should understand that that's the real reality of what we're doing. But selfless service, really proper service, if it's done, should be done serving. If we're serving people, there are many ways to serve, but if we're serving people, we should be serving them in such a way that we're also helping them dissolve the ego. We'll talk about that, but that's a big part of the work in Vrindavan, is to try to help these widow mothers to also serve others, to also, they have a very strong spiritual life, but to help them on their soul's journey. So everybody is on a soul's journey. In the Bhagavad Gita, at the beginning of the Gita, not at the very beginning, but one of the first major teachings that Krishna gives to Arjuna is called Nishkam Karma. How to serve properly, how to work properly, how to act properly in this world. And basically, the primary teaching of Nishkam Karma is to act without the desire for the fruits of action. Now, normally that's hard. That's a hard concept. You know, if you're at work, you're getting paid, you're in conflict with your fellow workers, or not conflict, whatever's going on, hard to remember that you're just doing this in order to dissolve the ego. But in pure service with Nishkam Karma, you can keep that more strongly in mind, and keeping it in mind, it serves the purpose of releasing us from ego. So, why serve? Because it's going to release you from ego. But it is also going to allow you to be a channel of blessing, the Master's, God flowing through you, so you become a channel of blessing to other people. And that desire to serve takes the life force that is within you that could otherwise go in directions that would increase the ego, but it takes that life force and it directs it in ways that gradually dissolves, layer by layer, the veils of ego that keep us from seeing who we really are.